What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 2 of the Engineered Impact podcast. Today, I wanted to share a little bit more about the concept behind the podcast and kind of how I came up with the idea and what I really want to spend our time together talking about. So, to start, let me ask you a question. What is it that you really want out of life? That is a surprisingly hard question for most people to answer. A lot of times when I ask people that question, they'll actually start to rattle off a list of things that they don't want. They don't want to be tied to a 9-to-5 job, or they don't want to have to travel for work when it's their kid's birthday, or they don't want to be stressed about money. They don't want to be afraid that they'll never be able to retire. Things like that. They'll rattle off a list of things that they don't want. And ironically, when we focus on what we don't want, that's exactly what we tend to get. For those who've actually taken time to kind of figure out what they really do want, generally the first responses to that question will be material things, right? They want a bigger house or a better car or the opportunity to travel more. They want to be able to spend time with family, maybe take time to pursue a hobby or a passion project, to write a book or volunteer more. Whatever it is, the people's first answers when they've thought about what they do want tend to focus on kind of those outward things. Those kinds of things are fantastic, right? They motivate us to work hard, to continue to push ourselves to achieve more. I've got a whole list of those things. I want a motorcycle I can use to go cruise around the canyons all around where I live. I want an F-150 to take my boys camping and hunting in. I want to get a pilot's license. I want to take my family to Hawaii and Europe before my kids grow up and leave. I want to be able to just create experiences. Earlier this year, I was planning on taking my family up to Salt Lake for just a whirlwind trip so that we could attend a live performance of Handel's Messiah. That's a bucket list item for me. This month, I was actually planning to go back to Utah and visit my dad and brother, and we were going to go ride motorcycles for a few days. Something we've never been able to do, but always talked about. For me, I want to just have the time and the financial resources to go create experiences like that for myself and my family that we can look back on, because to me, those things, define an abundant life. And some people might discourage you from pursuing those kinds of things, but I think they're healthy. I think it leads to abundance and a sense of joy and fulfillment. So I will never discourage you from pursuing those things. But as good as those things are, I've also found that when you really drill down with people, when you really kind of press them on what is it they really truly want, there's always something deeper than those kind of those first off the cuff responses about, I want more time with my family. I want a bigger house. There's always something more personal and far more important that they truly desire out of their life. So what is that for you? I've spent a lot of time asking myself that question. What is it that truly at the most fundamental level I really desire out of my life? And it's taken me a long time to figure it out, but eventually I realized that for me, it's simply a desire for my life to matter. When I'm on my deathbed, I want to know that I made a positive impact and I'm leaving this world better than I found it. Okay. So to me, what does that impact look like? Honestly, I don't totally know for sure. But there's a few things I do know, a few things I have come up with that to me would define having had that kind of positive impact. One of the most important is I want to have an impact in the lives of my children. When they look back on their childhood, I want them to know that their dad loved them. I want them to know that what was most important to me was God and family and freedom. I want to be their hero, just like my dad was and is to me. I want them to remember me as a guy who always was learning and trying new things and trying to be the best he could, and that hope that they would do the same thing. I want to have an impact in the life of my wife. I want her to know she was the most important person in the world to me. And I want her to always think of me as her knight in shining armor, right? I want my neighbors and the people I go to church with to remember me as someone who would drop whatever I was doing at any time, day or night, and come running when help was needed. I want to spend time building or participating in movements that set people free from things that hold them back in life. So those are just some examples of things I've come up with so far. Now specifically day to day, what do those things look like? I don't totally know yet. I'm continuing to work on refining what that looks like. But as I think about those kinds of things, those sound to me like a life that, as I look forward, as I'm sitting on my deathbed or laying on my deathbed, that I could reflect, I could look back on those things and know that if I didn't accomplish everything I was supposed to do in this life, I sure as heck tried. I did my best. Now, I don't know what your passions or goals or desires are. They're almost certainly different than mine, and that's fantastic. That's how it's supposed to be, right? We're not the same. I firmly believe that each and every one of us is born into this world with very unique individual strengths, individual passions, weaknesses, things that make us infinitely unique, infinitely valuable human beings. And I also believe that each of us has a responsibility in this life to not only discover what those unique skills and strengths and passions are, but to seek out ways that we can use those to solve problems and make life better for the people around us. I think that if all of us were doing that, if all of us were trying to figure out, how we could uniquely solve problems for other people, that the world would be a lot more peaceful, a lot more prosperous place for everybody. Unfortunately, very few of us actually manage to pursue those unique problem-solving opportunities and skills. And I've thought over the years, why is that? Why do so few of us actually take the time to figure out what those things are and what we could do that we would not only love, but that could benefit other people, right? And after spending a lot of time thinking about this, honestly, I think it's because we never get out of caveman mode, where we're so focused on survival. I'll never forget years ago when I was in college. This is when I kind of first figured this out. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and I had been dating for quite a while. I loved her. Everybody around us was convinced that we were going to get married, but I wasn't really making any real progress toward that goal. And the biggest problem was that same semester, I was going through the most horrific experience of my entire academic career in the form of Math 302 at BYU. The course was a mashup of what was normally two classes, linear algebra and multivariable calculus. And if you've never taken those classes, they're as bad as they sound like they are. But as bad as they were individually, this class took both of them and crammed them into one semester. Okay. Now, I'm not terribly good at math. I hate doing math for the sake of it. And I struggled so badly in this class. Literally every night, 5 days a week, I would go to the math lab and I'd meet up with the study group and try to wrap my mind around these super abstract concepts that didn't make any sense to me, that my teacher couldn't give me any practical application for. And we would often be in the math lab until it closed at 11 p.m. And then, more often than I care to remember, we would walk across the quad, go into the library, and work there until they closed at 1 a.m. And at that point, I would just give up. If I wasn't done, I would just give up. It was awful. And despite all my best efforts, I was still drowning in the class. I was still getting D's and F's on my tests, and I hated it. And I was just in caveman mode. I was spending all my time and energy trying to survive this class, right? And because of that, I couldn't focus on things like getting married or thinking seriously about my future. And so I was missing the fact that I had this beautiful girl that was everything I wanted in a wife right in front of me, and that if I didn't take advantage of that situation, she might get a little fed up and walk away, right? Now, fortunately, she didn't. She was patient with me. And the good thing was, as soon as that class ended, we were engaged within like 2 weeks, because all of a sudden I had time to sit back. I had the time, the mental space and energy to realize what an incredible opportunity I had, what an incredible girl I'd found, and then I needed to take advantage of this. And I think within like 2 weeks of that class ending, we were engaged. Thank goodness. But so caveman mode, like, it prevents us from moving forward, right? And I mean, why I call it caveman mode. Think about what it must have been like to be a caveman, right? If you didn't get eaten at night, you woke up in the morning, you spent all day trying to find enough to eat, stay alive, and then you go back to sleep and you do it all over again, right? And that's a mode that so many of us get into in our lives, as we get so focused on just survival mode and whatever it is we're doing, that we can't create the time and the space that we need to figure out, again, what are our unique skills, what are our unique strengths, let alone how could we actually use those to go solve problems for other people, right? And for a lot of us, that caveman mode focuses around our jobs, right? Our need to go out to get a paycheck, to save money for retirement, and hope that we get there, right? So, for me, early on in my career, I found myself again struggling with cave mode man. I wanted to feel like I had control over my ability to provide for my family, but the layoffs, I think I mentioned in the first episode that I started my career mid 2007, just months from when the stock market peaked and the Great Recession started. And so for me, the desire to feel like I had control over my ability to provide for my family was overshadowed by the fear that was created by the layoffs that I saw happening around me, by the fact that I saw people losing massive amounts of money in their 401ks, massive amounts of their home equity. And I started to realize that unless I did something very different than most everyone else around me, I was never going to have that control, or that sense of control that I could provide for my family. And on top of all that, I knew that deep down, I was capable of doing more than I was currently doing, to use my time, to use my talents, or to even figure out what those were, to make an impact for my family, let alone make an impact on anybody else in the world around me, right? Because I was so caught up in caveman mode, right? I was so concerned about keeping my job, being able to retire someday, that I couldn't take time to even start to figure out what I was uniquely qualified to do, right? So eventually I realized that both of these desires, the desire to have control over my ability to provide and my ability to have an impact, hinged on my ability to own and control my time. And that was going to require me to become financially free as quickly as possible, right? The idea of pursuing these things someday, maybe when I'm 65 and I finally retire, just didn't appeal to me. The problem with someday is sometimes someday never comes, right? And I didn't want to, again, be on my deathbed and look back at my life and just feel like I missed out, right? So that realization that financial freedom, achieving that as quickly as possible, is really going to be what unlocked my ability to, follow the voice inside that was telling me there's something bigger and better I could be doing with my life. Caused me to start asking some really hard questions about everything I thought I knew about money, and investing, and what I was currently doing inside our financial plan. And I realized that I had to figure out a way to create confidence that the things we were doing with our money would eventually allow me to own and control my time, so that I could have that time, I could have that attention, that mental space to discover whatever my unique strengths were, and then figure out how I could use them to benefit not only myself and my family, but as many other people as I could, right? To go out and figure out, how do I use these skills, these strengths, whatever, to go solve problems for other people. So I decided that I needed to take the skills I'd learned as an engineer, and do exactly that, right? I had to start learning. I had to start trying things out, collecting data, and then tweaking my strategy based on that data until I found something that worked, that I felt confident was going to give me that financial freedom and give it to me as quickly as possible. And so that's really where the name of this podcast came from, right? Engineered Impact. For me, it was the realization that I needed to strategically engineer my ability to eventually provide the kind of impact in life that I felt and knew deep down I was capable of having. Okay. So to wrap things up, I want to ask you, now that you know what drives me, what about you? When you peel back the layers of the big material things that you want, the time with your family, the travel, the cars, the houses, whatever that is for you, what is it truly deep down that you desire? When you peel all those material things back, what is it that really drives you? What is the little voice inside your head telling you that you're capable of? What impact are you capable of having? Okay. So take some time to think about that. And really, that's what I want this podcast to be about is, we're going to talk a lot about finances because, again, that's how we create that time. That's how we create that space. And so talking about how do we strategically engineer our ability to discover what our unique talents are, unique strengths are, and then develop those things into skills that we can use to solve problems for other people. So I'll share the things that I've learned. I will share my journey. And along the way, I hope that you will be able to discover those things for yourself. I hope you'll be able to find some things that you can implement in your own financial strategy that will give you that time and space. All right. So take some time to think about that. What are your deep desires? And I will catch you next time.